Welcome aboard, Raider Nation. Well, it is Thursday, and you know what that means. Well, I suppose, that means it's Thursday. So here we are again, getting ready for our matchup against the San Diego Chargers. And again, this morning I went on, I watched Pro Football Talk, I watched Good Morning Football, I watched a bunch of different programs, and not a lot of stuff about the Raiders. So once again, I saw a lot of stuff about Dak Prescott and, Aaron Rodgers and Matthew Stafford's, Aaron Rodgers' thigh and Stafford's finger, his middle finger, and a real quick blurb about Derek Carr. There was all this buildup, all this talk. We had some real influential people, Colin Cowherd, a few other people saying, look, Derek Carr is the MVP. Naysayers, obviously, other people saying, hey, we'll wait and see. But the one thing that I did find is, again, everybody kept saying that he was going to regress. He tends to regress as the season wears on. He's had one bad game so far. And again, the finger injury could end up hampering, some of that a little bit down the road. Not as bad of a situation as Matthew Stafford. I mean, look, let's face it. I don't care who you are. The quarterback requires the middle finger to throw the ball. I don't care how you throw it. They did a thing with Jeff George where Jeff George used his thumb to hold the ball, his index finger to hold the very back of the ball, and then the pinky to control the ball. He was probably the only quarterback that actually did that. The majority of quarterbacks are going to control the ball with these four fingers, using the pinky as the last piece to touch the ball, but not so much in terms of accuracy, throwing power, their ability to throw spirals, things like that. So Jeff George was pretty unique, where he really only used the two fingers, and his middle finger was pretty much kind of almost like the what the pinky does for a normal quarterback, which is be the last piece to touch the football. Matthew Stafford right now, I mean, having an injury like that to that middle finger, I don't know how you could have any type of control. Derek Carr, fortunately, again, is one of those quarterbacks that doesn't rely on his pinky. I saw both David Carr and Derek Carr talk about their particular throwing motions, and both of them rely on their pinky probably less than any other quarterback. So, again, I think as the weather conditions changed, we saw a much different situation. Again, as you get colder, the ball expands. As the ball expands, you need to have more of a grip on it. More of a grip on it forces the bone in your pinky finger to tense up, and that obviously could cause some problems. And I think that's probably has a lot to do with what happened there. But once again, not a lot. I'm sitting here and I'm like, wow, the Raiders have a chance to clinch a playoff spot. It's been so long. I mean, this should be one of the big stories coming on here. I understand the Chargers right now don't have a lot to play for. But once again, there's the scenario of the Raiders and the Chargers, both two teams possibly relocating. So many different things to talk about the MVP race, even though everybody wants to say after one bad game that Derek Carr is totally out of it. I disagree. 3 more games left. And if he has 2 big games here coming up against Indianapolis and coming up against San Diego, which he should, based on what's going on with the San Diego football team, he should be right back in that race for the MVP. He's going to have to do better. Don't get me wrong. He's going to have to throw 3 touchdowns, throw for over 300 yards this week. And again, we don't know where that pinky is at. This is a very tight-lipped coaching staff. But he did have full participation. Now, what that means, if they went to a heavy, run offense, run plan, not as big of a deal as if they sat there and in their practices went to a heavy-duty aerial attack, getting the ball down the field, working on that touch, working out some of those throws that he overthrew, underthrew, seeing if he can get more zip on those balls, those types of things. So once again, he was a full participant. That's good news. It looks like Carl Joseph, again, is going to be limited. Stacey McGee, also, we could really use him getting back in there. But, Mario Edwards is that much closer. We don't know exactly what's going on with Alden Smith at this point. But again, it would seem like they're probably not going to reinstate him. If they do, God, what a plus, what a bonus that's going to be. But again, the injury to quarterback Derek Carr, the fact that Carl Joseph won't be running around back there. And again, what the middle of our defensive line is going to look like is, again, up for some questions. But that led me into something, really interesting. Last year, Vic Tafur wrote an article about the new strength and conditioning coach. And Jack Del Rio has done so much, building a training facility there in Oakland, even though they weren't sure if they were going to stay in Oakland or not. What I want to talk about next, and in our next segment, we'll be sitting down and talking with somebody that's got a little bit of inside knowledge, a little bit of an inside track, has some sources with the stadium deal. Not going to get into that too much right now, but once again, when I look at what Jack Del Rio has done, when I look at what the Raiders have done, it really has been masterful on Mark Davis's part. You sign an extension, you have a rabid fan base. You're not going to be packing them up at the end of the year since you are in a playoff run. Everything they did is the opposite of what the San Diego Chargers have done up to this point. They have this deadline where they have to leave. The team is not playing very well. This may be the last season and your team is not doing very good. You should be packing the house at this point. Again, this football team could be leaving here in a few months. And talking about the San Diego Chargers. Whereas with the Raiders, you sort of have this, well, if it's not this year, it'll be next year. If it's not next year, maybe we can renegotiate and do something again. And again, our guest, Dante, in the second half of the show, we'll kind of get a little bit more into some of the logistics of that. But I think what Mark Davis did was brilliant. It was phenomenal. He's done everything right. He has literally done everything right, from his ownership, from what he's done with this football team, bringing in people that know football. What a pick Jack Del Rio was. At the time that happened, everyone was saying, there's nobody out there still with the whole nobody wants to come and coach the Raiders, who were the high-end guys. Nobody was going after Jack Del Rio. Well, those teams, they didn't do their homework. I mean, they obviously didn't do their homework. This is a football guy. He's a character guy. He brings a swag. He brings an air of belief into the locker room to this football team. He's gone through the process of building this football team, teaching them again within a very short period of time, not only how to compete, which he did in his first year, but now how to win, and hopefully how to win consistently. So this football team is getting some playoff caliber games. Even early in this year, the Denver game was a playoff caliber game. People may not want to say that, but the Denver game in front of a national audience against a very good opponent was a playoff caliber game. The Kansas City game was a playoff caliber game, even though it was a short week, hostile environment, injured quarterback, doesn't really matter. Those types of things are going to happen. Maybe not the short weeks, but everything else is going to happen. You'll have to play in cold weather. You may have to play with some injuries. I tend to see it that this team is going to be getting healthy at that time and getting back some key pieces on defense, and maybe some new additions if, Roger Goodell gets on it. But the bottom line is they're now playing in playoff style games. Did we like the outcome in Kansas City? No, but it didn't look like anything else that we've seen up until this point from this football team. We've had 2 bad games against Kansas City. Let's see what happens if we can get into the playoffs and face this team once again. So again, you're looking at Mark Davis. You say, okay, he went out and got a GM. That guy's building through the draft. He reduced the salary cap. He put the team in a competitive situation where it could bring in some free agents. You went out, you got a coach. Were his coaches the best available? Probably not. But at this point right now, coaches are going to want to come to Oakland. And that's the beauty of what's happened up till this point. Coaches are going to want to come to Oakland. They see a young quarterback. They see a defense with pieces that they can utilize. They see a front office, a head coach, and an owner that are all working together. All of these things are absolutely fantastic. And whoever it is that's going to be available when Oakland comes calling next year, I think they're going to have their pick if they want to go out there and move away from the coaching staff that they do have. Now, again, in terms of what Jack Del Rio did, he sat down and he said, you know what, we're going to build a new strength and conditioning room. We're going to bring in some new guys to work this program. And one of the guys that he brought in was Joe Gomes. So again, Vic Tafur wrote an article last year in April of 2015, and I just think it's relevant because I want to talk a little bit about injuries. The Oakland Raiders right now are, I think, just a tougher team. They're a more conditioned team. They've been able to outlast teams. They've been able to continue to fight, even with all of the travel that they've been doing, all of the things that would wear down a team late into a season. It doesn't seem like this team is having an effect. So again, Vic Tafur in his article, he talks a little bit about Joe Gomes last year, and again, he's there as well this year. And I think this is relevant because if you look at San Diego, they have a ton of injuries, just a ton of injuries across the board. It is so cool right now that the Raiders are investing in technology. They're investing in strength and conditioning coaches. They built a new workout facility. These are all things that we looked at with Al Davis and said, you know, he's got an antiquated scouting system. The facilities are subpar. They're not doing anything cutting edge at all whatsoever. If you look at Mark Davis now and you say even down to the smallest iota, he's really gone out there and made some significant changes. So let's take a look at Vic's article here. He talks about Gomes. The Raiders' new conditioning program is so cutting edge that the new man in charge, head and conditioning coach Joe Gomes, won't even admit that it's cutting edge when asked. Possibly, he says. Gomes used to consult for the U.S. Military Special Forces and U.S. Secret Service. His job is to reduce athletes' injury potential and raise the bar on their optimum performance levels, not to tell you how he does it. We are building the race car for the race, Gomes said. And that's a great point. You know, now you've got a pit crew back there. So it's not just your owner. It's not just getting the contracts in place. It's not just getting out there and coaching these guys up. But now you've got a crew that rushes in there and they undo the tires and they pop some tires on, and then they get you rolling back onto the track so that you're not losing a little time. You're not losing as much time as your opponents are trying to gain on you. So once again, I think this process has really helped this team to kind of move forward. You know, he basically, Gomes is a guy that worked at Exos, which is a cutting-edge facility that all of these, you know, athletes go to, all of the top athletes in the country when they're training for the combine. This guy worked with 10 of like 13 of the top, you know, talents in the country heading into that 2015 draft. So this guy knows how to get guys prepared. He knows how to get guys to optimal performance levels. And again, this guy worked for the Secret Service. This guy worked for the U.S., you know, military. This guy knows what it is that he needs to do. This is a guy that's going to have you prepared. You're going to improvise when you're out there. Injury or not, he's going to set you up. And he's got other guys. I mean, there's a few other guys, you know, besides Gomes. You know, the assistant strength and conditioning coach, he's got a couple guys that also worked at Exos. So, you know, here are cutting edge guys. These are guys that use technology. These are guys that are on top of everything that's going on, 24-hour plans, biometrics, everything that you need in order to know exactly where the athlete is at any given time. You know, his blood cell count, you know, his heart rate, how much he can take, how much he can't take, what type of conditioning a person is. You know, so again, let's take a look here. Where they do talk about this program. There are so many different components to an individual that we have to respect in order to get the most out of them. In order to build that map of them reaching their true potential, we have to look at their biological edge, their training history, their injury history, how flexible they are, how stable they are, how technological they are with certain lifting techniques, their acceleration and deceleration, their skills, cutting edge, etc. We have some great technology in-house now that can help the athlete exactly where he is, Gomes said. The Raiders' new performance system is a 24-hour approach as players' sleeping patterns and habits also will be addressed. So again, you're getting into how often the person's sleeping, how they're sleeping, what their recovery time is, what they're putting into their body, how their body is processing, metabolizing, how they're responding to certain skills, whether or not muscle mass, quick twitch fiber, all of these things are responding to what it is that these coaches are doing. And he continues on here. The two biggest areas that you can typically impact would be your recovery component and then your nutrition component. And if you just upgrade those areas, you'll find that in no time, that no matter what training you're doing, you have already improved the level at which you can adapt to that. The speed at which you can get people back has definitely increased, and that comes not just from research, but really good practitioners, therapists, sports science, and coaches working together. You can create an optimal healing environment. So once again, you have the Raiders who certainly have some injuries. You're going to get injuries. That is the nature of the game. When you're playing football, there are going to be injuries, different fields, different locations, the weather. Some guys will get freak things. They'll just cut a particular way. But that, again, comes from you not doing these particular types of things, you not being ready for the rigors of a football season. Some football teams have this. You know, the better football teams, the Green Bay Packers, have a gigantic, monitor where the quarterback stands in front of this huge movie screen and he sees everything that he would normally see. Some people use VR technology. There's all kinds of different things that some of the higher end teams are going to use. And then there are teams that are just out there, doing the do, right? Not, teams that are getting injured a lot, teams that are in warm weather locations that don't get used to some of these type of environmental conditions and hazards. That's why I think heading into some of these cold weather games, moving into the future, we are going to have an advantage. This is not a team that cannot play in the cold weather. I do not believe that at all. I believe that this is just a football team that, for whatever reason, the one cold weather game that it had was a problem for this team because the quarterback and his injury. And again, the game plan. So moving forward, I think that this team is going to get healthier as we're moving into the playoffs. They're going to get stronger as we're moving into the playoffs. And that is certainly an exciting thing. All right. So when we come back, we will be sitting down with our guest, and we're going to be doing a little bit of stadium talk because, well, you can never get enough of that, right? So why don't you guys stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Carpets is celebrating the holidays with a huge inventory clearance sale. We have the best prices and guaranteed installation. Why would you buy anywhere else? Whether you're looking for laminate, vinyl, carpet, tile, or wood, we have it all. Save up to 50% on selected items. Room-size rugs, only $69. Visit Carpets at one of our 6 Bay Area locations or call us at 1-800-355-4MMM.
All right, welcome back, folks. So as we talked about earlier, we're going to go ahead and get into a little bit of the stadium talk. The team right now is 10-3. We're headed toward the playoffs. And there's two narratives really that continue to dominate what's going on other than this team being ready to go into the playoffs for the first time in 14 years. One of those things is Aldon Smith, which once again, we have no timeline on, don't know exactly what's going on in that situation. And the other one is the stadium situation. So joining me now from Mile High Sports FM 104.7, as well as the Raiders Daily, is Dante DeMarco, also known as Raider Dan. Dante, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Pete. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, before we get started, and like I said, I scour the internet for different types of articles, always trying to look for what people are talking about. And I know that you guys have some really, really good scoops. But before we get into that, how is it that a Raider fan is at a Denver radio station broadcasting? I mean, I know you cover the Raiders, but how is that possible? I know we've talked about people in enemy territory, but holy smokes, I don't think I've ever talked to a radio personality in Denver that was a Raider fan.
Well, Pete, it all started for me back about 1996. I was a caller, and one of the local guys here in Denver coined me Raider Dan because I would always call the radio stations here because I was driving a truck all the time. I was a tow truck driver driving a heavy duty operating wrecker, and I would just be up late at night listening to sports talk radio. I got turned on to JT the Brick. I went to his book signing about 3 years ago, and I walked up to him, stuck out my hand, and said, "Hi, JT. My name's Raider Dan in Denver, and it's nice to meet you." And he took off his glasses. He put them down. He looked at me square in the face, and he said, "If you could take what you do in social media and put it together with a broadcasting career, you'd be a titan in the business." And so I kind of credit JT the Brick for pushing me into the broadcasting pool and making me who I am today. I've had 2 number-1 shows on the Mile High Sports Network. I'm very proud of that, being a Raider fan. But as a caller, Raider Dan is dead. As a broadcaster, Dante DeMarco is alive and well, working for Mile High Sports and the Raiders Daily. And I'm proud to be here today, Pete.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, as I said, at the beginning here, the Raiders are doing really good. Maybe we could talk about that on the back end. But what I really brought you on here for was to talk a little bit about the stadium. We've talked about it in the past, and this thing's like a Gordian knot. You never know what's going on, who's going on with what. Adelson, the lot group, the mayor, Mark Davis, you throw in the cities and all the different agendas. But I think it's something that certainly is worth talking about. Now they're saying that they're not going to allow they will make the Raiders petition for the relocation fee. They waived it for the Chargers. They can now move without having to pay a relocation fee. They will not waive it at this point for the Raiders. A lot of things are going on, but I want to take a look here at a tweet that you posted up. Oakland still has a shot. The organization needs to do is go to the NFL and ask for help, and should stop going to third parties like the Lot Group and Sheldon Adelson. Those who believe the NFL would help Oakland, meaning the NFL would pay to keep the Raiders. This is something that Mark Davis wanted from the start. Here is one of many caveats. If the city of Oakland sells land to the Lot Group, it's over. Eric Grubman alluded to this yesterday in the USA Today. Tell us, before we move on, tell us just a little bit about that. Tell us about the fact that if Oakland does sell this land, how that may fracture what chance there is of the Raiders remaining in Oakland.
We saw in the USA Today article a guy by the name of Eric Grubman, who works for the NFL, come out and say that basically the deal that Oakland put on the table last week was a carbon copy of previous deals. And if you look at the deal from the year before, it pretty much is. The problem that the NFL and the Raiders have with this is the use of a third-party financier. Now, when we go to buy a car at a car lot, that deal is generally between us and the bank. The car lot's just an intermediary holding on to the property, which in turn is the car, much like the city of Oakland and the county of Alameda is holding onto the property. Their plan is to sell the property to the financial group, meaning that you're using a third party here, where it should just be a two-party streamlined affair, especially when you're accounting for people in your contract that aren't even signed off on the contract yet. A lot of that there's a lot of problems, a lot of holes in that deal with the Oakland plan that just need to be addressed. When the Raiders first moved back to Oakland in 1994, there was I believe, a $50 to $80 million renovation done to the Coliseum, which at the time I said, this is just a waste. You should be using that money to level that hole that Al Davis left in the early 80s and start new now. And that was 14 years ago. That was when Rich Gannon was the quarterback. They had a really good team. There was a lot of momentum behind it. That was before the tarps. And this is one thing that I'm going to say to everyone. And I want everyone to be very clear in what I'm saying here. Since the tarps have gone up, There has not been a single sellout at the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum. Not one. This season alone, they're averaging 80% of attendance in a tarped-off stadium. The team's 10-3, Pete. What's going on here? Don't tell me that there's this groundswell of support in Oakland when you can't even sell out 54,000 seats in a dilapidated stadium.
Yeah. So now that kind of moves on to the next point that you put into this post. It says here, the Raiders will move anywhere that they can get a deal. Mark Davis and the Raiders are doing surveys to see how many Raider fans would go to games in Vegas. These surveys are going through all of Nevada and other places close by within driving distance. This is pretty much the one and only thing Davis is worried about. As soon as I can get a link, it will be posted. So again, the question is he worried about attendance in Vegas? I mean, if you're only selling out 80% with a 10-3 football team, moving to Vegas, a lot of people are saying would be even harder because of the transient nature of Vegas, the fact that people are coming and going, that it would be harder to have a solid fan base and continuous sellouts. What are your thoughts on that? And do you have any idea at this point how those surveys are coming back?
Well, you know, Pete, here's the problem that we have in Vegas is that there's $750 million sitting on a table in the middle of the desert waiting for Mark Davis just to come and pick it up. Oakland can't say that. Oakland can't say that they have any money for him right now at all. And that money is the first payment, I believe, is next month. It's a $25,000 payment, an initial payment to the stadium board so that they can fund their offices, get the site selection down. There's 8 sites that they're picking from in Las Vegas. Most of these are on the outskirts of town, close to the Strip. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered here, but there's a lot of high-powered people. The governor of Nevada is behind this plan. Not a mayor of a city or a city councilman, a governor, a city elected official basically went to his state legislature and asked them, hey, I need you guys to come in during your vacation for a special session to vote on this tax initiative so we can raise this money to build what I'm not going to call the Raiders Stadium, Pete. What I'm going to call it is a mecca of sports. For the longest time in this country, we have had Madison Square Garden be our mecca of sports because it's New York City, it's Times Square, it's the middle of Manhattan. Well, if you go to Las Vegas, if you've ever been to Las Vegas and you've seen the new Vegas, gone are the days of the 99-cent strip cocktail and the comped room. This is a place now where you can go with your wife and children and see and do anything you want. You don't have to go to Los Angeles, California, or Beverly Hills or South Beach to see the lap of luxury anymore. I can go to Las Vegas and eat at a Mr. Chow's or a Javier's. I can go to Las Vegas and shop at a Gucci or shop at a Guest store or any one of these high-dollar outlets that my wife sees on TV all the time, and they feel good about themselves. I was out there 2 months ago, and I was staying at the Venetian. I'm standing in the lobby, and I said to myself, I can see an entire hotel here taken over by the throngs of Raider Nation, 65,000 of us invading the South Strip and taking it over, much like we're going to do this weekend in San Diego for the Chargers game, something that we do religiously as a fan base. I see those same things happening in Vegas. The only thing that I didn't see in Vegas was a site that was selected. Everything else is in line in Las Vegas, except for 2 things, the site selection and the vote by the owners. That's what we're down to. But if you remember back to last year, and this is what I'm saying, and I'm saying this directly to the Stan Oakland crowd because this is one of their caveats, one of their many caveats they have with this whole ordeal. The city of St. Louis had a deal on the table that was fallible to the St. Louis Rams and to Stan Kroenke. Stan Kroenke basically looked at that deal, thumbed his nose, and told the NFL, I'm moving to L.A. If you don't let me move to L.A., I'm going to sue you. The NFL doesn't want to be in court for anything at all. That's what they don't want. They already went down this road with Al Davis back in the 80s. They don't want that bad publicity. Remember, we have a collective bargaining agreement coming up here with the NFL Players Association. That's going to be a lot of bad press for the league. I think we can both agree on that.
Yeah,
absolutely. What needs to happen here is that the false information from one side needs to stop. as fans, if you're really concerned about this, this is who you listen to. You listen to the guy who signs the checks in Oakland. That's one Mark Davis. Mark Davis has repeatedly said, I'm moving to Vegas. So until we see Mark Davis, Roger Goodell, and Libby Schaff holding up a sign at a podium at Oakland Alameda City and County Hall, they're moving to Vegas. It's pretty simple. Mark Davis has said, I'm going. It's his toy. And for these people who call him a pauper and says he's broke, well, hey Pete, if you owned an NFL franchise, are you going to be broke? Are you going to start struggling? You're going to be struggling to feed your family and put food on the table?
Right.
There's a reason why. Hold on, I got coffee. There's a reason why Mark Davis drives around in a 1997 white Dodge Caravan, because he's not impressed by all those kind of things. He wanted to keep the team in Oakland. He gave Oakland every possible chance to keep this team there. There's, like I said in the story there, there's still a shot. The only shot that the Stay in Oakland crowd has and the city of Oakland has is for them to go to Mark Davis and say, we'll sell you the land on the current site for $1. It's yours. Then
right.
the NFL would be on board. Then Mark Davis would be on board because he has a place. He has something that's fallible. He's not dumping $300 million, which is part of the Oakland plan, into something he's never going to see a return on. If you have $300 million, would you just burn it and watch it go up in flames? No. That's what these people are asking him to do. That's what they're essentially asking the NFL to do.
Right, and I think one of the big things, going into this situation here, I think, is the players that are at the table. I mean, when you're sitting at the table and you're talking about somebody's team, like you said, without having them present, I just don't think that that's ever going to be a good business practice. I don't think it sends the right type of message to the owner. The fact that Libby Schaff is going and working with a third party, like you said, the fact that the NFL also is going and working with third parties while they're also trying to cut a deal with Mark Davis. Mark Davis did them a solid last year. He backed out of a situation. He allowed them to do what they wanted to do, so that there wasn't a big deal. He played the right card, in my opinion, last year. I think that there's got to be something that goes into that. I think the owners have to understand, okay, you know what? This guy's doing the right things. He's not immediately turning around and running to court like Kroenke said he would do. We don't owe him quite as much as we owe the Spanoses, the good old boys. But the fact of the matter remains that this guy seems like he understands what he's doing. He's building a football team. He's taken, all these things into consideration. But when you have a hostile government, when you have segments of a hostile fan base, it starts to get to the point where, again, you almost say, what am I doing here? Why am I here? Let me stay here for a couple of years. Let me potentially win a Super Bowl. And then let's go out and let's build a palace and let's keep this legacy going. We don't have very much time, only a few minutes, but what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are this: that we have a group that thinks they're doing what's best for Oakland, and all they're doing is hurting the entire situation with their nonsensical nonsense, is what it is. Saying that they have information and they have this and they have that. You don't have anything until you have Mark Davis, Libby Schaff, and Roger Goodell standing at a podium saying we're staying in Oakland. Until then, it's all minutia. The thing we need to concentrate on right now is that this football team is 10-3, and if they win out, they're going to have a first-round bye and be in the playoffs for the first time in 14 years. That's what we should be talking about here. If these fans who want to dress up in face paint and go to owners' meetings and think that they're making a difference, you're not doing that, okay? I'm sorry, but Jerry Seinfeld in the Seinfeld episode made it very clear that no one respects a face painter. I get you love the Raiders. I get you like dressing up in costumes, but going to an owners' meeting dressed like that, why don't you just go to a wedding dressed like a Joker? I mean, it's ridiculous. You're not doing anything. And then to come out and say all this just garbage that you know this and you know that. Well, you must know somebody more important than the guy who signs the checks in Oakland, than the guy who is basically running the show for the owners in New York. I want to know who these people are. That's what we don't have here. Pete, I want to thank you very much for having me on. This is something that, as for a fan, it's frustrating, but just remember, trust what the organization says here. Mark Davis has, since he's taken over the Oakland Raiders, has done nothing but tear down something that was broken and beaten up and battered and rebuilt it into something that we can all be proud of as Oakland Raiders fans. Thanks for having me on, Pete.
Absolutely, man. We appreciate you coming on. And you guys also came out with a new, I saw that Stephen Michael put out that you guys have a new program. How can people watch your program, watch what you do? I know they can obviously probably listen through the internet to the radio station, but why don't you tell everybody what times you're on and also about the new show that you're doing with Stephen Michael?
I'm doing the Raiders Daily with Stephen Michaels. Those podcasts and radio shows are up weekly. We don't have a set schedule for those at this time, but what we're doing is we're trying to get these things out at least twice a week, one pregame, one postgame, so that everybody has all the information they need. You can get me at RaiderDan5280 on Twitter, or you can Google me, Raider Dan in Denver, and you'll find me. It's the best way to do it. And and we got some other really big things coming up for the Raiders Daily, and it's shows like yours, Pete, that we love coming on to spread the good information about what this organization is doing, how it's been rebuilt by Mark Davis, and the future looks bright if you wear silver and black. Raider Nation for life. Thanks, Pete.
All right, man. You take care. All right, folks, that's going to wrap it up for today. Once again, if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and send an email to w2w@gmail.com. You can get a hold of us on Twitter, also on Facebook, and through our gab.ai account, the W2W @gab.ai. All right, folks, we'll see you guys tomorrow.